All right, thank you guys for coming to our PLC today. So at this time in front of you, you should have your copy of the lesson plan that was provided to you already, your hard copy. And thank you for reviewing that in advance. We are super excited to see Mr. Knock sort of demonstrate and rehearse what he's got going on today. So Knock, if you could just start by reminding us of the instructional priority that you're focusing on, and then also the strategy that you want to rehearse for us, keeping in mind that we are not teaching content, we are rehearsing our strategy.
Right. Okay, so my lesson focus, I think, is more on instructional priority 3. I definitely have other parts of the IPs in there, but I think the one that I want help on is the authentic assessment part and making sure that I have a good way to assess my students at the end of the lesson. The strategy that I have, there's a question trail assignment in there, but that's not really a strategy I think I wanted help with. I really want to include a summary statement at the end to really incorporate having my students take what we learned and then summarize the importance of it for their own kind of takeaways. But I'm really, not sure how to do that. How do I make sure that I'm using math and writing strategies appropriately? So I think IP3 kind of fits into that pretty well for what I want.
Okay, cool. So regardless of where you're at in your curriculum, based on just the student data that you have that maybe you're getting from either like formative assessments or your data trackers or whatever, why are you implementing this specific strategy within this lesson?
Yeah, I think I notice a lot of my students are capable of doing things in the moment, but they're struggling to go forward with that information, right? We'll get 2 weeks down the line and I'm like, okay, let's go back and think about the strategy or this topic that we learned, and they're not being able to fully remember what it is. So I think there's some metacognition that's not happening. They're not thinking about what we learned, so I need to have them thinking about what we're doing more so that they can keep track of it.
Okay, awesome. And then what is your intended measurable impact, of this strategy on student learning? So what needs to be included for this to be measurable, for us to know that kids have gotten it?
Right, so I found an AVID strategy that talks about summary statements having a say, do, and a mean part. So I think the measurable part is I want to see those 3 things built into their summaries. And then I'm also hopeful that I'll be able to see an improvement with measuring that in my assessment data. They're going to remember the things that I'm asking them to summarize.
Cool. All right, well, when you're ready, we'll go ahead and start our rehearsal. If participants could just keep in mind, we want to try to give at least 2 specific glows. If there's any clarifying or coaching questions, maybe make a note of those. And then just any, grows that maybe we have or, feedback specifically pertaining to this instructional priority and, what Knock needs help with, then that would be great. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, so just to start off, my objective I put was that today we're going to complete a question trail using volume of 3-dimensional solids so that they can solve mathematical and real-world problems involving volume of 3-dimensional figures, which is our standard, and then they'll know they have it when they can write a summary statement that includes the say, the do, and the mean of today's lesson. And so the part, like I said, that will be in there will be the question trails that you all had a little copy of, just kind of solving volume problems, and going through that. We'll do like a quick review of the volume formulas before, and then do that. Once we get to the end though, this is the part that, like I said, I think I need the help with. I think this will probably be the next day's lesson so that we can have the time to go over this, and I kind of created this PowerPoint. Like I said, the summary statements in mathematics involve a say, a do, and a mean. And so I was going to have students talk about what is the importance of summarizing our learning. These would not pop up right away. It would be, let them think about it. Maybe we'll come together on some ideas and see what they come up with, and then I'll share the ones that I found from doing my own research, which is that it helps discern important ideas, allows them to focus on key vocabulary, rewrites concepts in their own words, and supports metacognitively thinking about how we solve complex geometric problems. And hopefully they'll come up with a lot of those on their own. And then I was going to break down what it looks like. So in the context of a reading class, we would see summary statements as what does the author say, what does the author do, and what does the author mean. Obviously, we know from math that that's not always going to be the case, right? We don't have an author telling us what they're saying or what we're doing or what we mean. So we're going to have to kind of revise that a little bit. So what I did is I pulled...
Hey, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I want to just take a step back because I love that you're walking us through kind of your thought process. But I love it if we could make this more, feel a little bit more like a rehearsal, so that it feels like we are your students and we're sitting right there, because I think it's going to be hard otherwise. Like as you're explaining it to us, it makes sense to us, right? But you're not gonna teach it to the kids this way.
Yes, okay, I get
So
what you're
if you
saying,
don't
yeah.
mind, yeah, just rehearsal
Okay,
as if you were the students.
so let me backtrack then. So I know I put some of these up, so let's start with this, y'all. So if we're talking about summarizing learning, what are some ideas y'all might have that would be important to summarize what we summarize what we did in class today?
It could help us understand, like, if we know the concept, we'll be able to put it into our own words, but if we don't know the concept, we might struggle with that.
Okay.
It could point out that maybe we are not familiar enough with the vocabulary that's
Okay.
needed in order to be able to talk about the concept. And so that could point out that we want to teach the vocabulary.
Okay.
You know, it will help us solve those complex geometric problems maybe that we will see when we get to our EOCs and stuff.
Okay, very good things. And then here's the things that I kind of came up with. I think it aligns with a lot of things you all already came up with. All right, so the first thing that we want to talk about is that when we're talking about a summary statement, we want to talk about things that the author's saying and what they do, or what the author wants to do and what the author means, which we know that in our math class it's going to be a little bit different than if we were in a reading or an English class, right? So in English class, this would be pretty easy. I could give you a text and you could say, what is the author saying to me? What is the author trying to do? And what is the author's meaning behind this? And that, I think, makes sense for reading, right? So we as a class need to figure out how is this going to apply in a mathematical sense, which I think is going to change a little bit of the context here. We're not going to say, what does the author say in math? So let's think about that. So here's the first one pulled from our reading summaries, our English class summaries. So it says, what does the author say? Is there someone who want to read what that part one says for us?
In this section, introduce the source and the author and provide comments about the author or source. In the same sentence, paraphrase or directly quote the author's main claim.
Okay. So I know there's a sample there, but I think in terms of our class, the sample's not the most helpful for us, right? But we can see that it says we're going to introduce the source and the author and provide comments about the author or the source. So what can we do here for what we're talking about math? How can we change that to what the math is going to say?
Maybe we introduce like the type of the problem, or like the question the problem's asking.
Very good. Yeah, geometry is very much grouped into different topics, right? So if we can figure out what topic they're trying to get us to focus on, that can definitely help us with focusing our topic and focusing what we're learning into a specific area. It helps us kind of categorize where we're at, right? Anyone else have other thoughts?
I just have a question. Could the author in the math context be my notes that I took in class? And so if I took notes on
Volume.
the author or the source are my notes, and then what my notes say about volume is that, for example, it's made up of length, width, height.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Very good. So yeah, we are taking notes in class, right? We might not have an author to go back to other than this ancient Greek man way back a long time ago, right? But we have notes that are our authors. Euclid, yes, Euclid, very good. So Euclid has all the stuff, so that can kind of be our author. The things Euclid told us is what the notes are saying to us, all right? So then we would go on and we talk about what does the author trying to do? What is the author trying to do here? So Lauren, would you like to read our part 2 of what the do says?
Sure. Do you want me to read the directions or the sample?
Just the directions.
Okay. For this section, analyze what the author is doing in individual paragraphs or in a section. Describe the rhetorical choices the author has made. For instance, the author shares an anecdote, reviews current research, or does some other work, and explain why the author has made these choices. Usually, these explanations begin with "in order to."
Very good. All right, so let's think about how could we take this then and turn this into a math idea. Again, thinking about the things we've already talked about, looking at our notes, thinking about what topic goes into. How can we change this to a mathematical?
So, sorry. So if my notes say these are the components of finding the formula of, the components of finding the volume,
Mm-hmm.
let me start all over. If my notes say that this is the formula for finding the volume, what my notes tell me to do
Mm-hmm.
is I have to multiply length times width times height.
Okay. That is great. So you're saying maybe take the steps of the problem
Yes.
into our summary. How do I do the problem that I'm being asked to do?
Okay. Is
So
that-
steps and or formula, like either one?
Yeah, I think both of those could fit. Steps or formula, either one of those things. That.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would imagine the do part is then gonna be each step, like
Okay.
along the way to getting the answer, but.
Very
Can I
good.
go back to this for one sec?
Yeah.
So if I took notes based off what my teacher did on the board, and
Mhm.
so in that way, you're kind of the author or the source, like you as a teacher. And then what I'm looking at is, I'm looking at my notes to say, okay, like what did Mr. Knock do? And in
Mhm.
that way, it translates into steps. Is
Yeah.
that?
No, that sounds great. I mean, it's very nice that you're making me an author. That feels very powerful.
Well,
Yes,
you are.
yes. What did Mr. Knock do? That's perfect. What
Okay.
did he do? And that's an easy way to translate that we could use, right? So let's go on to the last part. Then we have our say, we have our do. Well, what does the author mean? Steph, would you like to take that last part for us?
Show. In this last section, evaluate the significance of the text. What greater meaning can be assigned to the text? What deeper connections can we make to our own lives? This section allows the reader to move the discussion from one context to another.
So I already know that we all know how deep math is in our life, and it's a very huge connection, right? We all feel that. It's important to our own lives. But that's not what we need in our summary statements. What could we do with the mean in math? How are we going to make this mean something?
What stood out to me was the part that says from one context to another. So maybe that means like I can take the sample question that you gave us that we identified as the do and know how to apply that to similar questions that aren't the exact same
Okay,
context.
great. Yeah, so kind of changing the context, but using the same concepts and how it connects.
It could also be that maybe a mean is that, you know, it's clear that in geometry, we use formulas to solve problems.
Mhm.
And so the fact that, so what all of this means together is that if I am trying to solve a problem, I should look to see if there's a formula.
Okay, yeah. Seeing kind of those things and using those to help guide your decisions. Yeah. Any other thoughts? So I think there's one other step we could absolutely take it to is saying like, I mean, if I start with this volume lesson that we're doing all the way at the end of the year, if we had started this in August, would you have understood what we were doing?
Not if I didn't have the
Right?
resource-
There's certain things that we need. So I think also kind of taking what you said about connecting concepts, right? We could connect concepts from the beginning of the year to future concepts. How are we all linking these together? So I think there's also that's happening in math, that we're connecting different ideas together, right? So I think then what we need to do then is talk about how this would look for us. So let's take a second for everyone to write this down. We've got say, do, mean. In your own words, contextualize what we just said. What would the say be in math? What would our do be in math? And what would our mean of our summary in math be? All right, so now that you've all kind of taken some time to write this, I would love for you to think, pair, share. I know we've only got 3 people here, so maybe you can all kind of think, pair, share that together. So have a discussion with each other. What did you write down, and see if there's something you need to add to your own definition.
I said the say would be like the formula or the concept.
Mhm.
I said the same.
Okay. For do we all have steps? Okay, for mean, I completely forgot everything that was just said. So I don't have anything for mean,
I put real world application.
Yeah.
like context.
I was finishing right, but to say, just to solve problems, I need to, like this, I need to make sure I can use the right formula to solve this type of problem.
Okay.
All right, as we all kind of wrap up, let's take a look at one example, and then I want you to write your own summary statement for me based off yesterday's volume task card question trails that we did. So I wrote a summary statement that says this about a previous topic that we just finished. So in geometry today, we reviewed the properties of parallel and perpendicular lines. The information says that parallel lines are always the same slope and perpendicular lines always have slopes that are opposite reciprocals. To do one of these example questions, we have to solve our equations so that it's in terms of y equals mx plus b and isolate the slope to determine if they're the same or opposite reciprocals. The significance and meaning behind this is to be able to determine if geometric figures have parallel or perpendicular lines by using coordinate planes to analyze them in geometry. So take some time, try to write your own summary statement based off yesterday's lesson, and then you're going to submit that. And then that would be where my strategy kind of ends.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much for rehearsing that. I know so much more than I did before about applying the strategy to math. So let's go ahead and let's just kind of walk through glows first of Knox rehearsal. So things that specifically related to IP3. We have our IP3s in front of us. Things that we thought just kind of stood out. A glow. Lauren, if you want to start us out.
Yes. So one of the connections that I liked that I wrote as a glow for IP3, one of the teacher actions is to explain assessment criteria and provide specific actionable aligned feedback. The first part of that, to explain the assessment criteria, I think you were really specific in explaining the components that you needed to see in the summary, the say, the do, and the mean. And then what I originally had as a potential grow to show what a good one looks like, you got to. So that also adds the component of like showing a specific example that this is the criteria that's going to be used.
Okay.
I just thought it was great. It's an awesome strategy.
Okay, do you want to maybe look at the checklist for IP3 that we gave you so that you can kind of look through those boxes and pick something like specific that maybe stood out to you as being really good? So for instance, while you look over that, I'll go, I appreciate this variety of sort of assessment methods that you have. First, we're starting with the question trails so you can see if they are getting the concept and things like that. But now we're adding this extra layer of metacognition to it through a summary statement, so they're both engaging in a question trail, and now they're also engaging in a sort of exit slip writing style thing that is going to benefit them, and now you're getting their understanding of this concept in multiple ways. So I think that that's really useful, and that absolutely aligns to IP3.
All right, so just going back to the instructional priorities, a glow was that if the last one that says implement spiraling / distributed practice and plans to ensure continued mastery, I could see how implementing this over and over and over again in the future will give them enough practice to be able to really take ownership of the strategy and really learn how to write a summary without having to do necessarily say, do, mean in the future. They'll just know the components of the summary.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any clarifying or coaching questions that we want to ask, to clarify anything in this?
That's
One of the questions I had in the very beginning, you asked students like, what is the purpose behind summarizing? And you had your list to get to. And I'm wondering, what do you do when students are like, I don't know, because you're asking us to, or because we have to, or because it's worth points?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I probably need to include some space at the beginning for them to think about that. So maybe another think, pair, share in the beginning to give them time to process. That would be a good idea. You're right. I know if I ask that question, there'll probably be some awkward silence at first until someone uncomfortably offers up an answer. So yeah, I think that would probably help there.
Is there some sort of graphic organizer you could give them with the space for say, do, mean, so that they can remember the parts that they're supposed to include?
I definitely could. I'm sure there was something in the Avid strategy that I pulled it from that I could look at and see if it's there.
I just can
would bet
imagine
there's
it
something
being
already
like,
made.
if it's such a new strategy, it's so different for them to do writing and math.
Right.
That if they had specific boxes within which they're supposed to put the information, then it'll help them keep on track of making sure that they're including all the pieces.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that leads us into kind of grows for the rehearsal. So this is feedback that is specifically again aligned to IP3, and in this case, I think that's a great point. Maybe considering like ELL or ESE scaffolds with like sentence starters or sentence stems or something like that to kind of make sure that we're hitting especially those vulnerable groups.
Right.
And that might be something just to consider adding.
Okay. Yeah. So some sentence starters to put in there, I think, would be super helpful. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I put for students in order to experience success on the culminating product. It needs to be given in a way that all students can access. So just like Steph said, one of the things for sentence stems, you could actually pull it from your exemplar, even just bolding the parts that say, the information says to do one of these example questions. This significance of and meaning behind this is, those are the parts that kids could repeat in their own summary. And then I was also thinking a potential grow might be to include, we know from your lesson plan that there's 5 unfamiliar vocabulary terms that is the focus of the question trail. So if there's specific key terms you want in your summary, it might be a great language support to have like a word bank. Like make sure that your summary includes cylinder, prism, pyramid, cone, ball.
Okay, yeah, those are great thoughts. I didn't really even consider that. I think that would really help support a lot of my students, even the ones who may not even be in those vulnerable populations. So I think that's something I'll definitely do.
Sure. All right, so moving just kind of into this like reflection kind of piece, discussion piece. You know, after rehearsing the strategy, how do we feel like this will impact student learning, specifically this strategy? So if we think about question 3 and hitting this, or I'm sorry, IP3, thinking about authentic assessments, particularly Knox's original goal of like having students engage in this metacognitive process, so they're reflecting on what they're learning. You know, how do we feel like this is impacting that? Do we feel like it's impacting that, etc.?
Are we all answering this question?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take just a second to think.
Feel free. Take a minute, look over those IP3s if you need to. Okay. All right, so, you know, how do we feel about this impacting our student learning? I know as I was just kind of thinking about it, one of the things is from the student side of this, I think as Lauren pointed out earlier, it's the self-assessed understanding of newly learned concepts. So I do think that this is, you know, doing a good job of kind of hitting that IP3 because it is kind of forcing students to take those notes. So the concept, which is the say, you know, the steps, which is the do, and the sort of application, which is the mean, it's taking those things and they are kind of having to voice that and assess their understanding of it through that reflection. So I do think it you know, does a decent job of hitting that, which I think is great.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that one question I had was, so the intended impact in terms of IP3 is to build this in as a metacognitive strategy that you can use multiple times, not necessarily that they need to learn a single thing about geometry, right? Like, so there's not like a specific concept from the question trails that absolutely needs to be in there.
Right, I think I want it to be something like, I use it with the question trails because I thought this was a good kind of culminating activity in this, but my goal would be for them to use it kind of, you know, periodically every week that we take notes or we take whatever lesson we do, so they're really thinking about what we're doing every day in class if possible.
Well, when you bring up the notes thing, like that's what I think of as the repetition that it provides. So they have to go back to the notes again, they have to reference that material to write it, and then through the process of writing, they're thinking about the material again. And so, to me, that's, you know, an achievable way to learn information is just small repetitions, often.
And that's hitting that last box under the from teachers section, which is the implement spiraling / distributed practice, you know, to ensure continued mastery. So I think we are hitting that, which kind of brings us to the next question of, is the strategy aligned to instructional priority look-fors? And if not, you know, what can be changed to strengthen alignment? So, you know, we've kind of talked about a few of these already that I think it is hitting. It sounds like from our discussion, one of the things that could strengthen that alignment even more are those like sentence stems, for example, for ELL students and ESE students. So it does feel like that's one of those things that can be added and just take it up like that much more. And then also like Lauren said about adding another think, pair, share maybe toward the beginning. And so I think those are things that could really just strengthen that just a little bit more. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Or are we okay to move forward to the next piece?
I think we kind of covered.
Yeah, I feel like we covered everything. Yeah.
Okay, so not just in general, like, as a result of this rehearsal, what do you feel are your next steps, going forward when you implement this lesson?
So I think the actionable steps are, I mean, the simple things is just bolding that to help kind of create some easy action, some easy sentence stems. I really like the idea of a graphic organizer. I think, especially as we're learning this, maybe even incorporating at the bottom of whatever I'm doing, right? If I make notes for them and put that at the bottom, it gives them a place to put that. So I think including that graphic organizer to help them at first will really help. And I think the word bank, I really like the idea of that. Like, these are the words I'm hoping you put in here that I'm expecting to see in here. So even including that within the graphic organizer would be great. So sentence stems, graphic organizer, word banks to help them kind of get over the hurdle of being able to do this in the beginning.
Cool. Okay, so before our next PLC then, where we do student work, obviously you'll teach it, and then we'll kind of collect that student work, and then we will, talk through that next time, when I see you guys next time.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.